morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the students, wherever you are, wherever you are. I hope you're all safe and sound. Today's lecture is on the evolution of trade theories. This particular topic comes under the first section of this course, which is pure theory of international trade. So when we are talking about evolution of trade theories, we will discuss the mercantilist theory, then the Ricardian model of international trade, and the first exposition of that idea was through his book in 1817 named The Principles of Political Economy and Taxation. Then we'll do some extensions of the Ricardian model, because the Ricardian model is based on only one factor of production and say two goods and two countries. Now you can extend it to number of countries, number of goods. You can increase the number of goods. But the basic tenet of the Ricardian model would remain the same even if you extend the model. This Ricardian model is called the classical model of international trade, followed by the Heckscher-Oberlin trade model. Professor Heckscher, who used to work in the University of Lund in Sweden, his theory came in 1919, and then his student Bertil Ohlin, jointly they did a work on the this particular trade theory, which says that trade takes place because of differences in factor endowments. Let me say that when I talk about trade theories, all trade theories are trying to explain the pattern of international trade. Why are countries trading, and which trading partner do they prefer? What are the determinants of international trade? So that gravity model that we will discuss is the empirical counterpart of checking whether the covariates of international trade have a significant impact on countries which are trying to align with each other through international trade. Now, a gravity model can also explain the foreign investments, bilateral foreign investments. They can also explain the migration which takes place between two nations. Followed by Heckscher-Ohlin trade theory, we have the Linder's hypothesis, which says that trade takes place because of similarity of demand. This happens once your markets get saturated, and then you move out, you tend to look for markets outside, but you tend to trade with those countries which have similar per capita income like yours. Then came the seminal work of Paul Krugman. These are called the new trade theories. Paul Krugman got the Nobel for his work, Nobel Prize for his work, which says that it is economies of scale and product differentiation which best explains the international trade. Let me say that international trade, around 2/3 of international trade is intra-industry trade. That is trade in goods with similar factor intensities. these earlier theories were not able to explain two-thirds of international trade, and that too happening between countries which are similar in every form, every way. So it was only Paul Krugman's new trade theories which was able to explain the trade taking place among the industrialized countries, and that trade was due to economies of scale and product differentiation. Then came the new trade models, the seminal work by Belitz, then Eaton and Cotton, Stephen Redding, Cheney. They are of the opinion that one needs to explain why do firms trade. It's not that countries trade. Okay, the earlier assumption was that only countries trade and each firm was a representative firm. Here they are of the opinion that you need to look at the granular level data and especially the firm level trade. Why do firms trade? So in this context, you will see that product differentiation and market conditions matter. The other characteristics of the new trade model are that you will find that there is both intensive and extensive margin, meaning that with liberalization, when you reduce tariffs, it's not only that the existing businesses go up, but there's an incentive for new firms to come in. So one feature of the new trade models are intensive and extensive margins and product differentiation, then market conditions, then the efficiency matters, because once you're talking about firms, you have to talk about the efficiency part, and so you will find that it's the most efficient firms which select themselves into the export markets. Firms which are little bit lower in hierarchy in terms of efficiency or productivity, they cater to both domestic markets and international markets. And firms which are inefficient, they exit. So, as like new trade theories by Paul Krugman, new trade theories are also talking about scale and selection effect. Scale meaning that the existing firms increase their production and reduce their average cost, and selection means that there will be some firms which will exit out of the markets. So think of the liberalization process. One needs to understand that if you know these two theories, you can well understand that there will be a phase when some firms will exit. So that will be a difficult phase. Some firms will close down, while others would pick up the business, reap economies of scale, produce goods at a lower cost, and then they export that good. So the new trade models has some features coming from the new trade theories as well. And then the other feature is that sunk cost is quite important, because there are some firms which invest heavily in R&D and still they find that their products may not come at all to the market. Like the pharmaceutical firms, it takes around 13 years for, in a normal time, these are pandemic times, but it takes around 13-14 years for a particular drug or a vaccine to come in the market. Because there's a whole lot of process. There is regulations, these are patenting process, and more importantly, clinical trials. And yet you may find that after 13 years, the medicine may not come at all because it may not be effective. There may not be enough of antibodies which remain in your body to sustain yourself. It may remain for 7 days, 8 days. So efficacy matters. Now in this case, you are investing billions of US dollars. In normal times, it's the firms which have to, source this much of funding. Okay, in these times you may have global cooperation and you may pool your resources, but still the possibility is that even after 13 years, or in this case, if you fasten this whole process of bringing the vaccine early, then there is a possibility that your sunk cost may go waste. That is why it is called sunk cost. You may find yourself in a position that the medicines may not there be at all in the market because of the efficacy concerns. So all these features wherein the features of industrial organization and international trade meet, these are discussed under the new trade theories. So this is the entire evolution of trade theories, and they fall under the section Pure Theory of International Trade. I've already explained that the international economics and finance has 4 sections. One is, of course, Pure Theory of International Trade, which tries to explain why do countries trade, what is the basis of trade, what is the pattern of trade, which country is trading with which other country and for what reasons, what are the factors. All this is discussed under the Pure Theory of International Trade. I've also written some other theories, namely this Posner and Vernon's theory of shifting comparative advantage, which came in the 60s and which can explain the dynamism in the comparative advantage theories, that this comparative advantage position is not permanent. It shifts. The comparative advantage shifts from one country to another country. You've seen already that in case of computer chips, there was this Silicon Valley in California which used to produce computer chips at the least cost. Slowly and steadily that advantage was shifted to Japan, and from Japan it shifted to the ASEAN nations, and from ASEAN it shifted to China, then probably India, then probably Middle East. So because of various reasons, the comparative advantage shifts, and I will explain the comparative advantage concept which was given by David Ricardo. And you will find that there are different ways to ensure that you have a comparative advantage in the production of that good. It can be your all latest 4IR technologies, be it quantum computing or 3D printing or robotics or automation or deep learning or artificial intelligence. All these are 4IR technologies which can help you to shift the comparative advantage in your favor. There can be other things like telecommunications, development in telecommunications, harboring global value chains, then development of your ports, highways. These are all ways to shift the comparative advantage in your favor. High-tech construction, these are ways to shift comparative advantage in your favor. So the theory of shifting comparative advantage will be read through Posner's and Vernon's theory of shifting comparative advantage. And then how does trade has an impact on income distribution? That is studied through specific factor model of Ricardo and Wiley. You may see that trade, of course, increases the pie, it increases the GDP, but it has a differential impact on the factors of production, which may not be reflected in the Ricardian model, because the Ricardian model assumes only one factor of production. But you will see that trade has an unequal impact on the returns to factors of production. So, when you liberalize trade, it's very important that the supplementary policies are also executed with the trade liberalization efforts. The other topic that we will be reading under pure theory of international trade is the globalization process, along with what determines foreign direct investments, what determines migration of people from one country to another country, FDI spillover effects, and so on and so forth. But this is something that we will also study under the pure theory of international trade. You may be knowing that globalization process is integration of your economy with the outside world through international trade, through foreign investments, through migration, through capital movements. And it has been all facilitated by reduction in tariffs and non-tariff barriers, by removing restrictions on trade and services, including restrictions on movement of skilled people, including restrictions on foreign companies trying to operate in your own country, including restrictions on that you cannot just say that a company should use domestic inputs only. It has to be a competitive process. So if you find that you're getting inputs at a competitive rate, at a lower rate from another country, you just cannot say so that you need to buy it from your own country. So in that way, one can say that this Atmanirbhar model has to be very clearly defined. We already had empirical evidence of import substitution policies not being successful, at least in India and Brazil. Okay? And generally you may be hearing this claim that exports are good, imports are bad. Now this is something that we need to contest. And this is what Ricardo was saying as far as 1870, because he was contesting the mercantilists who was claiming that exports are good, imports are bad, trade can only take place among countries which have an absolute advantage in the production of the goods. So, if there are two countries and one country has an absolute disadvantage in the production of both the goods or all the goods, meaning it is inefficient in the production of all the goods, mercantilists would claim that there will be no trade between this country and the outside world. It was Ricardo who said that even if some country has an absolute advantage or is efficient in the production of all the goods, there will be gains from trade because it may have a comparative advantage in the production of that good. Comparative advantage means that it can produce a good at a lower opportunity cost or lower relative price. So when I discuss the Ricardian model and the mercantilist model, you will see the distinction between absolute advantage and comparative advantage. And these are some concepts which are misunderstood by many, including policymakers, academia, economists, and so on and so forth. And attached to it are certain myths related to these two concepts. So I hope by discussing an example followed by the mathematical model, I will be able to explain the Ricardian model of international trade and make a distinction between Ricardian model and the mercantilist model. So now I will rub this board and I will discuss the Ricardian model. I've been sharing lots of YouTube videos. Then I have my own NPTEL lectures, and there are other materials through other social media posts. So please read them. And it's also important that you read the basic readings, which is the book by Feenstra and Taylor, which probably covers the entire topics, pure theory of international trade. Then we come to the trade policy, where we discuss the different trade policy instruments from tariff to non-tariff barriers, quotas, export subsidies, export taxes, import subsidies, and so on and so forth. Then we go to international monetary theory, where we discuss the theory of exchange rate movements. And fourth, we discuss the past and the present international monetary arrangements. You may be knowing that we had the fixed exchange rates regime from 1948 to 1973, and then it's the flexible exchange rate. It's the market forces which determine the exchange rates. But within the exchange rate regime, you have different forms of flexible exchange rate regime, depending on how much you are able to address at least three factors when we come to dealing with international finance. These three factors are you should have an independent monetary policy. You also look out for having perfect capital mobility, and you have with you the choice of a fixed or a flexible exchange. You will find, and I will teach you, that you cannot have an independent monetary policy, you cannot have a fixed exchange rate, and you cannot have a perfect capital mobility all together. This is the famous trilemma of the international finance. And associated with this is the issue of balance of payments. Balance of payments are like recording all transactions which a country does with the outside world. It follows the double entry system of recording the transactions. So in accounting sense, balance of payment always balances. But then you must have heard about deficit and surplus of balance of payment. Deficits, you have to then talk about the official settlement account of the balance of payment, which says that if your official reserves are greater than the liabilities that you have towards the foreign official institutions, then you have a surplus. If your official reserves of foreign currency are less than your liabilities towards the foreign official institutions, then you have a deficit in the balance of payment. Like US keeps harping that we have a heavy trade deficit with China. US is concerned about it, so it takes different types of policy steps. Recently in 2016, it imposed tariffs on Chinese products, which is famously called the US-China trade war. India is also concerned about having these balance of payment deficit with China. In fact, we are concerned about having deficits with at least 7 of the East Asian nations. But these are different times. We have a pandemic, and then from 2016 we have seen that protectionism has scaled up. As a result, the GDPs of your country and the outside world are going down. As a result, the exports and imports are going down. And that's the reason that you find that India has a surplus, at least in the trade part, the trade balance, which is the difference between exports and imports, because your imports have fallen at a rate which is higher than your exports. So it's very important to address these issues, reading the concept of balance of payment. So then natural question is that if there is a deficit in the balance of payment, will you do something about it? US did by imposing tariffs. But if you find that the deficits are sustainable, then you may leave it, because it will be now reflected in the movement of your exchange rate. Your currency will depreciate against the foreign currency. That means your export prices in terms of foreign currency will go down. Your import prices in terms of your local currency will go up. What it should do, it will deter your imports, it will increase your exports, and your balance of payment condition may come back to the equilibrium. So all this under the third and the fourth part, which is international monetary theory and international monetary policy. So my next lecture would be on the Ricardian model of international trade. Interestingly, you may have got a lot of inputs and the YouTube videos on the GTAP model. What it does is that if you wish to analyze that whether India should align with either the East Asian bloc or the Shanghai Cooperation or the Mercosur in the South American counterpart, then African nations, then you need to understand what is the economy-wide impact of tariffs, because aligning with some country means that you need to reduce the tariffs, and so it will promote trade in goods. But then if you are aligning with the other nation, there's also services trade, there's also investments. All this can be analyzed through the GTAP model. When I come to the discussion class, and if I'm able to share the screen, I'll tell you how that is done. Related with this is the concept of trade creation and trade diversion, because these are two concepts which you have to understand for understanding how to analyze the regional trade agreement. So see you in the next class, where we'll be discussing the Ricardian model of international trade. So bye for now.